guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today we're the video I've been meaning to do for a while, but I've been not nervous but skeptical to do it because I feel like dark romance is so subjective. So I'm sharing the darkest romances I've read. I don't necessarily recommend these. I gave some of them 3 stars, not because of the darkness, but because sometimes with a dark romance it can be overshadowed and the romance is not as prominent, and I am here for the romance. And so I do realize, looking at me, you may not think I like dark romance. I wore a bright pink sweatshirt today. I'm a pretty positive, happy person, but I do love reading a good dark romance. There's just something very gritty about dark romances, and it really forces our characters to go through bad things and make choices that they're forced to make that they might not make normally, and it's just so fascinating to me. And I don't mind blood and gore. I don't have a lot of triggers. The one thing that really gets me is animal death. I have dogs. I'm a huge animal person, so I don't like on-page animal violence. I am gonna try to give you the best triggers I can for these books. Most of them deal with sexual assault or death, violence, gore, stuff like that. Before I get to these books, I do want to say, don't come into my comments and say these aren't dark at all. Like, to me, these are very dark. I've already seen some comments from some people in their videos saying some of these aren't that dark, but I feel like if characters go through something very, very traumatic and dark on page, that is very dark to me. I don't have a lot of problem with gore and stuff. I love action movies. I grew up on 80s action movies. I don't have a problem with blood and gore, so a lot of the stuff that makes me think it's really, really dark is definitely more so any type of assault that happens to the characters. So I oftentimes don't even remember how dark books are, especially if it's like a mafia book where they're just like chopping people up. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen, didn't it? Because I'm just like so unfazed by it. But darkness is whatever you want it to be. I'm not going to judge you for thinking something's dark, and I hope you don't judge me for thinking these are dark. These are ones that I just feel like really put these characters into dark places, and they had to come through that and find their happily ever after out of that, which I think is just so fascinating how authors are able to do this. And these authors are all so fascinating to me. I've gotten to interview a couple, and it's just so interesting seeing their minds and how their minds work and how they wrote these books. So I will get started. The first one I think is the darkest, and this is the one that I did not love because I think that the darkness overshadowed the plot. And I know a lot of people like it, but that is this one by Tilly Cole. The characters went through a lot. Now, the problem with Tilly Cole for me, I either really, really love her books, because one of these on here is one of my favorite books. 2 of these on here, though, are books I gave 3 stars because so much of the assault the characters went through, this one as a child is on page. We got flashbacks of it, and it was just a lot to me. And these characters take on the persona of Alice in Wonderland in order to cope with the trauma that they went through, which was very interesting to me. It is very interesting looking at the mental effects of trauma, and I feel like Pam Godwin's another author that does that really, really well, and Tilly Cole does too, but this one didn't feel enough romance for me. It was just very, very dark, constant on-page rape and assault, and it was too much for me, but it was very dark. They go and kill a lot of people together, and that's the premise of this book. And so I know some people love it. That's why I did end up getting it. Almost all of these I own because I love dark romance, and I feel like when I see people hyping a dark romance, I'm gonna love it. This one was one that I didn't love, but I'm still keeping it because I do love Tilly Cole, so it's just part of my collection. But it was just, I don't even very much remember the romance. The only thing I remember are the dark elements of this book because they completely overshadowed the romance to me. So this one of the darkest I've read. Let me know if you read it and if you enjoyed it and what you enjoyed about it. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that book. But also one that I don't really see a lot of people talking about, and when it came out, we were really excited for the Rapid Fire Romance Book Club. We chose this as one of our picks, and that's Raphael. This one, again, has a lot of assault on page, and it takes place in the Catholic Church, so it is assault from priests, and these boys are literally kept chained and locked up and are constantly abused. And again, with this book, I don't remember the romance. Most of the rest of these, for sure, because I think that these are the only 2 3-star reads on this list. Every other book I've read that's on this list, I am obsessed with the romance. These 2, I can't even tell you who the love interests are because that's not what I remember about these books. I just remember the super graphic darkness of these books and what these characters went through and their trials of trying to get out of those situations or coping with those situations. And so I know that there's a bunch of them, so it does say he's the killer. Like, I honestly don't remember too much about this book other than the fact that I was like, geez, this book is really, really dark, and I don't think I enjoyed it. So I don't think she's even continued on with this series that much. I do know there was a novella that was also very dark, and I think she might have come out with book 2, but this one came out a few years ago, so I don't know if the reception for this, 2019, I don't know if it had that great of a reception because she never really continued on with the series, but not for me, but very dark. Then I have a duet. I have 2 duets on here actually. This duet is by one of my favorite authors, and I feel like if you ever get into a captor-captive situation, it can turn very dark. And so the one that I have is Enthralled and Enamored, which is the enslaved duet. I always call it the Enthralled duet, but it's not. This is by Gianna Darling, and in the first book, our heroine is sold by her family into sex slavery, and so the hero is the person who buys her. And so I've actually only read 1.5 books. I don't know how dark this one is, but this one, she is put through a lot. Like, she is trained as a slave for her master, who is the hero of the book. And like, typically, like, I don't have it on this list, Sam Mariano Untouchable was way too much for me because I do not like when the hero is the one sexually assaulting the heroine, and that is our darkness and they're supposed to fall in love. I just do not like that. And so Untouchable by Sam Mariano, it was 60 pages in and we were still on the same scene of him assaulting her, and I was like, I cannot root for this hero. So I put that aside. I didn't like that, so it's not on this list. I never finished it. But this one, she is trained to obey him, and there is also a game in here where people die at the hands of our hero, and she is the prize. Like, she is the prey. And so it gets really dark in that aspect, and she is just put through so much in this book, but it's so intriguing seeing the hero actually fall for her. So I really like this. There is a cliffhanger in here. This one starts out with them not together. Like I said, I never finished this one. I do plan to finish it. I was just in the middle of so many books when it came out that I never got around to finishing it, but definitely very dark when you're sold into sex slavery. I do have one more that is of that genre, so I'll go ahead and talk about that one. The next one I just finished reading, and that is Delivered by Pam Godwin. I already dropped Pam Godwin's name. She is such a fascinating writer. I need to reach out to her to see if I can interview her on my channel at some point, because her books really take a look at what trauma does to the mind and what people will do when they're forced to do it. So this one is, our heroine is in the sex slave industry. She kidnaps people and trains them, and the hero is one of the people she kidnaps, and now they are both at the mercy of the people higher up. She is not someone who wants to be doing this, but she has shut down so much of her humanity in order to protect something, and so that's why she is doing it. And so she kidnaps him. They are forced to do awful things. Awful things are done to her, awful things are done to him, and it's very interesting looking at the psychology behind it and like what will break a person and what won't, because she is supposed to break these people, and our hero is not like anybody else, but she knows she should not have taken him because he is not what fits their normal person that they take, who will break easily, and he will not break easily, and he finds himself falling for her and has no idea why and feels so protective of her, and it's so intriguing. But most of it takes place in this house where he is being trained, because she is training him, and he is tortured, he is abused, and oftentimes at the hands of our heroine, and it's so hard to read, but it's so interesting. And I loved how much he still fell for her and understood her and knew there was something more going on to her. So highly recommend reading this one. I really enjoyed it. I said in one of my recent videos, I don't know if I want to continue the series because the second one is with a character who was horrible in the first book, but again, it could have been like her where he was doing it for a specific reason. I don't know, but his character really put me off, and like I said, I don't love it when the heroes are the ones that are the really bad people. Now, like, I say that, but like one of the next books on here, he's literally a serial killer, but there's like a line that I cannot cross when it comes to heroes in contemporary published books, because if that happens in like a really old bodice ripper historical, I understand it's a product of the times, but if it's a book written today, I don't like reading that. So one that's super popular that gets darker as the series goes on, and it's definitely very violent, is the Mindf series by S.T. Abbey. And this one, our heroine went through something really bad in her past, and we actually see that happen in the later books. I can't remember which book it is. This is a 5-book series, and so all the books are novellas though, so you can just fly through them. But I do know we meet her in the beginning. She's actually a serial killer, so we see her brutally murdering these men and wanting them to suffer. And so that's very dark in that aspect, but I think it really turned dark near the end when she was reliving what happened to her. She is dating an FBI profiler. They actually meet in the very beginning of the series, and he is on her case. Oh, but also we have a different serial killer that has it's another one of his cases, and that serial killer is trying to retaliate against the FBI profiler and using her, and it was amazing. Like, I love a heroine who can protect herself and does not need a man to protect her and will literally just like take you out. And that's what our heroine does in here, and I loved her so much, but it is dark. Like, she goes there with her kills, and we also see what drove her to do this, which is, again, a very interesting look at how people will take control of their lives again, because that's what she's doing. She was horrifically violated and had things taken away from her, so she is taking it back. So I love the series. I'm surprised it's been so hyped and huge on TikTok considering how dark it is, but I'm glad people appreciate it as much as I do. Another book that I am choosing because of how dark the beginning is. The whole book itself isn't too dark, but they go through a lot in the beginning together, and it was just the angst in here for me is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. So they are kidnapped together, our hero and our heroine, and the hero is actually her sister's fiance. They've known each other for like 8 years, and just they hate each other. They bicker and banter all the time, and he had to pick her up because she was at a bar and couldn't get a ride, and he's the only one she could get a hold of, and so he picks her up and they get kidnapped then. And this serial killer, his goal is to kidnap people who hate each other, force them to fall in love, and kill them in front of each other. So that in itself is very sadistic and dark and twisted, right? Well, we see them kidnapped together. She is raped by the kidnapper multiple times in front of the hero, and then the kidnapper forces them to do stuff together, and it is horrific to see. It is horrific to see their emotions. It's horrific to see them being forced to do something they would never ever in their wildest imagination ever think they would have to do. And it's heartbreaking watching these scenes happen, and then it's heartbreaking watching them connect over what happens to them and have this bond that no one else understands, because they do escape. So it's just the beginning of this book that's very, very dark, but they escape and have to go back to normal, but they are the only two people who understand what they went through, and so they have this bond that can't be broken that nobody else understands, and people are like, just move on already, especially her sister, and they're like, we literally cannot because of how traumatized we are of what happened to us. So this is one of my favorite romances of all time, watching two people who can't be together, who have such a long history, and then are put through something so traumatizing together, and then they find peace in each other. I just really love this book so much. I definitely want to reread it again, but please know going in that it is a very, very dark beginning and it's really hard to read, but the romance is amazing. All right, the next ones is a duet, and it is the serial killer duet, and that is the I don't even know what is this duet called? I don't know, but it's the There Are No Saints, There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. These are the alternate covers. I do have the other ones. She released these though that I really, really love. What's really interesting about these books is that the heroine is taken by a serial killer who is a rival serial killer of the hero. And so I think it was like an art gallery they met at, because our heroine is a starving artist. She really wants to be an artist, but she's pretty broke and has not broken into the scene yet. Our hero literally will put pieces of his victims into his art. And he has a rival artist who is also a serial killer. And so they both meet our heroine, I believe, at an art gallery. And the one serial killer sees the hero's interest in her. So he kidnaps her and leaves her for dead. for our hero. And our hero sees her and he's like, I ain't touching that. And he literally leaves her there. She is like cut up and bleeding and like about to die. And he's like, nope. She ends up being rescued and gets out anyways. And the hero is so fascinated by her. He literally stalks her. He rents or buys the place across the street from hers so he can stalk her. Her friends end up being murdered. So she is just this very innocent, not innocent, but like she's a very naive person in the beginning. She grows so much over the series and really pushes back against our hero, even though he's a literal serial killer. And there's so many scenes in here that jump out in my mind, but it's so twisted, but so good. And they really play mind games with each other. But I really liked it. And of course they have to deal with their enemy, who is the other serial killer, so that comes up in here. But if you want a serial killer romance, that's pretty dark. I would recommend picking this one up. Okay, so another one I have not read in like 3 or 4 years, but I remember it being very dark because of the situation the heroine is in. So that is Raised by Tilly Cole. And this one, he is a fighter, and he was kidnapped when he was young, and pretty much his memory is wiped. He has no idea who he is, and he is in this facility where they are literally like pumped full of drugs and fight to the death. So every fight he's been in, he's had a fight to the death, and that's all he has known. He's like literally like attack and kill. And the only thing about his past life he knows is a name, which is the reason he's there. And that name is the name of our heroine's fiance. Our heroine's fiance is a horrible guy. He is absolutely horrible. They are the kids of these mafia people, and she is only with him because she is the only one who can like bring out some sort of humanity from this guy. So she has to give in to what he wants. So she does end up being intimate with him, but it does not feel like consensual because she is only doing it to subdue him. And so it's really hard to read about her being in this kind of relationship because he is a sick, twisted person. And so the hero ends up escaping from this jail that he's in, this prison, this fighting machine prison. And he decides to enter these fights, which I don't remember if they were fights to the death or not, but he's entering these fights so that he can meet her fiance at the end, because her fiance is a good fighter. They know he's going to go far. They think he's going to win it all. So he's entering so that he can kill her fiance. During it all though, they start falling for each other because like I said, she's the heroine, he's the hero, and it's so good. But lots of fighting, lots of darkness in here, and just really hard reading about her in that kind of situation. So it's definitely a very dark romance. Alright, the last one I have is a Pam Godwin, and this one's dark because of all the things our heroine is put through literally from the first chapter. And this is the one where I've seen some people say, oh, it's not that dark. But to me, I have not read a historical romance this dark, and I feel like for its genre, this one is pretty dark, and that is Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. And this one's actually a love triangle. And so our heroine, I'm pretty sure the scene in the beginning is her very young. She's waiting for her father, and she is literally almost raped in the beginning. What happens is she actually inherits her father's ship. So she is a female pirate captain, but there is a pirate hunter after her, and she's also married to another pirate. She is taken and kidnapped by the pirate hunter, and she is brutally assaulted by many people in this book, including one of the heroes, which was really, really hard for me to read because, like I've said, that is something that I cannot condone in my romances. But I've seen so many people read this and discuss that particular scene and how that forces the hero and the heroine to talk to each other and realize that they are actually falling for each other, because the hero that does that to her is the pirate hunter one, who is supposed to be bringing her back to kill her, and so he's supposed to hate her and everything she stands for. So know that going into here, but she is just put through so much in this book because she is constantly kidnapped and put into these situations. But I really enjoyed this book. It is so intriguing, the love triangle that happens in here, and I really need to reread it because I think I read it at the end of 2020 and I was like obsessed. So it's been over a year and a half since I read this, but definitely a very dark historical romance, in my opinion at least, and I still really recommend it to people, but I tell them no, that these characters go through a lot. But it's on the sea, and I love pirate romances, so this was just like everything I wanted in a book. Alright, so those are the darkest romances I've read. I know there's a lot darker ones out there that people don't particularly like, but I don't want to read something just because it's dark and knowing I won't like it. Like, I want to fall head over heels for the romance, which is pretty true about, what, 80% of these that are on this list. So when I read a dark romance, the romance has to be absolutely amazing for me to really like it. So let me know if you have any favorite dark romances. I would love to hear. I do love this genre. I would love to read more in it. So if you have recommendations for me, let me know. And also let me know what the darkest ones you read are, because I would really love to hear what you've read. I know there are some authors like Kate Webster I know writes some pretty dark stuff that I have not touched because I'm a little bit scared. But if you do have one that you didn't like, let me know you didn't like it so that I know to stay away from it. But I'd love to have that discussion of what you've read before. And that's all I have. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.